Welcome back, Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brut. We are here for part 2 of Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. For those learning Daf Yomi, we've been learning Inyanim of Stam, and we have 2 new sponsors who are dedicating this episode. The first one is dedicating it Le'ila Nishma Ze'ev ben Hillel, the father of Daphna Zuckerbrod, and also by Rabbi Dov Lokich, Le'ila Nishmas, his father, Meir Lipa Eliezer ben Doiv Ber. May their neshamas have an aliyah, and all the chassidim should be an aliyah for their neshama. And we thank them for their sponsorship and dedication. Rabbi Brut, many people have not yet gone and gotten the Rabbeinu Tam tefillin since last episode, so you probably figured it's a good opportunity to maybe share some more information that may push people in that direction. We thank you for joining us from your ma'amad. We are recording this in the middle of the war. I don't know what the name of the war is. Shagas Ha'ari, Epic Fury, Shagas Aryeh, but whatever we're calling it, everyone should be safe and sound wherever they are. If we see people join Rabbi Brut in the Ma'amad, we'll know that something is going on. Take it away.
Okay, so Baruch Hashem, I said in the beginning of the last episode that I originally didn't realize how much material I have to say about Rabbeinu Tam tefillin and only focusing on certain aspects. But Baruch Hashem, someone else reached out and that's to sponsor episode number 2. But that's all we'll be doing for now, even though we could definitely fall into a rabbit hole and keep on going. And to continue and tighten some of the things that I said in the previous episode and to get to some other topics, such as other sources of the Rishonim, such as not Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, some other people, what they say, the role of kabbalah, other controversies, and some other nakudis in this story. So we asked basically a question. Some people don't even like the question, which they're definitely entitled. They don't like the question, but how did this machlokes evolve? How did it happen? Why don't you just look into what happened? One day, Rabbeinu Tam woke up one day and said, "You know what? I don't like how tefillin is being worn. I have a shvar gemara over here. Just open up the tefillin of the previous generation, see how everyone did it. What's going on? He's going against everyone. Is that how you tachin the Rabbeinu Tam, as much as great as he was, is going to do such a thing?" So some people don't like the question, some people don't like the answers. But last time, the main mahalach that I brought, and at the time I was bringing it out through the Butchacher in his Eshel Avram, but others, that they were going with a big theme in Hilchas Tefillin, which was that there's a halacha called gufnaki, that you have to have a gufnaki when you have your tefillin. And because of that, slowly, and we mentioned some of the aspects of how it developed, people stopped wearing tefillin completely. Okay, that sounds very scary. Who exactly was it? Everyone? I will not say it's everyone, but the people as a whole, it was becoming more and more over the centuries. Less and less people were a makbid in this mitzvah that we would, today we take for granted that everyone does it and does it properly, but they were not doing the tefillin. They were not wearing tefillin. So there wasn't so much so, and it all started from good intentions. They worried, not gonna have a good fnaki, so they slowly stopped wearing it bechlal, because we spoke out that originally the mitzvah of tefillin is to wear it the whole day. So they slowly it changed over time, and less and less people were wearing tefillin. That does not mean to say that no one was wearing tefillin, or what extent, how many people were wearing tefillin, how many people were not wearing tefillin. I'm not going there. I don't even know if there's any way to really know. But the point is, we see from Chashiv and Makairis, and I'll mention just some of them, is some Rishonim, they talk about it. Rabbeinu Bechai has a piece about it, and Rabbi Shua ben Shwib has a piece about it. There's a Sefer Chassidim from the nephews of the Rosh, otherwise known as the Sefer HaMaskal, they talk about it. From different places, and we see it was going through in the Middle Ages also, people were nichshal in tefillin, and the explanation partially had to do with the sugya of gufnaki, that they were so nervous that they're not going to be able to wear tefillin, that they're going to be over on the gufnaki, so they didn't wear tefillin at all. Okay. Now, so a lot of times, this is just to give some background to understand stuff, what's going on over here is like this. I once heard from someone, an author of a book that he worked on for a very long time, that he said he still felt after he finished his book and he did his research that he still didn't say properly what it was that he wanted to say. Until many years later, he was asked if he could the book went out of print, if he could reissue the book. So he said, okay, yeah. And they allowed him to write an introduction about the book that he wrote many years ago. And what happened was, he said, finally, in the course of this, he finally was able to say what it was that he wanted to say the whole time. And you find sometimes you have a speaker, gets up to speak. He could have a lot of his ideas, but to have it arois mamish punkt exactly how he wants to say it, there could be time, there could be all different types of issues. He does not have it perfect. So to confess is like this. Many times when I speak over here, so I'm working on a topic. Sometimes it's materials that are collected for a very long time. Now, even as the clock is ticking and we're about to begin recording, I'm still thinking about it. My brain is racking and trying to organize it, and I don't have it all perfected. And so my head could be in all different places. As I begin the episode, right before we go live, I print out some notes or papers or stuff that I'm going to use. So what happened is the first episode, I'm about to do this. I'm all of a sudden I see a line somewhere. It says something that changes everything. So I go, mamish, make myself crazy. It's 20 minutes before the episode, and I run to go try to track it down. It's a piece, according to what I saw, a piece in the Shibolei HaLeket. Okay, great. And this mamish, I see this line, and you're going to hear in a minute what the line is. I'm going crazy. How did I miss it? Fine. I go quickly, pull out Shibolei HaLeket. I don't like to see things from secondary sources, and I want to read it when I get to to say it over when we get up to the episode. I pull out one of the editions of the Shibolei HaLeket that I have, which is the Shibolei HaLeket from Mechon Zichron Aaron. They reprinted the Shibolei HaLeket in recent years, fine. And I can't find the passage. It doesn't make sense. What's going on? Fine. I pull out a different edition of the Shibolei HaLeket from Buber. Punkt, I can't find the pages. Okay, then I locate, fine. Bottom line is I find the passages. I print it out. I'm all excited. And last time I was planning on saying these three lines. L'maisa, a lot of times what happens if you follow these episodes, sometimes towards the end, all of a sudden the clock runs out on me, so to speak. And then all of a sudden I'm like trying to figure out. And then Bahala happens, kicks in, and then I forget to say the important point. You can say I'm yapping and saying different things, but there's a starke makairis from, as I'm about to say, from a Shibolei HaLeket. Okay, fine. After the episode, all of a sudden I'm thinking, I'm listening, and then I realize I made myself crazy. I tracked down this piece, mamish, as the clock is about to record, the Shibolei HaLeket. Goodbye, I have it, and I forget to quote it. Okay, great. So now I go back and say, what's going on? Why couldn't I find it in my Zichron Aaron edition? Anyway, this turns out like this, that the Shibolei HaLeket, fascinating chibur that it is, worthy of its own long episode. The bottom line is that there were parts that the Zichron Aaron edition, they assumed is not relevant. They found this in other places, in the Siddur Rashi and whatever, so they said, okay, we're going to take out these 5-6 pages. Now, l'maisa, a lot of times people quote even those pages. It turns out they made a mistake. They should not have taken out those pages. And those pages, some of the pages were really also were original Shibolei HaLeket material. Okay. Without getting into all the nitty-gritty about this, what does it say in the Shibolei HaLeket? The Shibolei HaLeket has a whole arichos on the sugya of gufnaki, and the Gemaras that we mentioned last episode, and then he says towards the end the following lines, which relate to us. Mipnei shenechelku behilchosei and Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam hilkach lo yadinu lemever behilchasa. To say, not only he's talking at the last week, I brought in a Gemara that talks about that if there's a famous Gemara, Paishei Yisrael lo menichet tefillin, they don't wear the tefillin. So the question is, they don't wear tefillin ever. There's a lashon karfasta. What does that mean? Karfasta lo manich tefillin. What's going on over there? So in the course of this, basically the Shibolei HaLeket says that part of the reason it's not only that Gufnaki was the story, and what I showed earlier was this issue of Gufnaki starts way back already from the time there was already Xeris on Klal Yisrael, so they already had other reasons why tefillin was removed from being observed by a lot of people, but then there was Gufnaki played a role. But he says another thing was because there was a machlokes between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam tefillin, had a weird tefillin, So that's what caused a lot of times people not to wear tefillin. You say this machlokes that we're talking about is what perhaps in the times of the Rishonim triggered that people were nichshal in wearing tefillin. They said, I don't know which pair of tefillin to wear. Do I wear like Rashi or Rabbeinu Tam? Now, obviously, it does not necessarily mean the Rashi and the Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. It means the seder of what we now know is Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. Anyway, so this was this line, the Shibolei HaLeket. Fine. Now, so at the time when I was reaching the conclusion over here with this Nakuda, so I was saying over from this Chuvas Mayim Chaim from Rav Yosef Mashash. So he has 3 different beautiful answers where he talks about it. Now others say a lot of these answers, and we'll see some of them soon. But in one of the answers, he says like this. He says that tefillin, who was in charge of the tefillin? He says tefillin was in the hands of the Seifrim. It wasn't the Bezdin. Now, some Seifrim Taka knew, but there were also Seifrim that were not Bekiyim exactly in the Seder. And therefore, what happened was that there was different orders of the tefillin that were done by different people. And he says, and I found someone came to show him pairs of tefillin, and it was not like Rashi, it was not like Rabbeinu Tam. And he passes it, whatever, fine. So you could say like this, and he says like this: Nuchaloim should be made Rashi. Nisayra kal be'iza livdoik tefillin kashenoi lefrakim akama kilos. We actually discussed this, the origin of when are you supposed to check your tefillin. We spoke about this in Rav Hai Gaon shiurim. So someone wanted, in the times of Rashi, someone went to do it. They started all of a sudden to look, and all of a sudden they start seeing there's different orders. So Rashi went and he was machriya his way. Rabbeinu Tam, he came out a different way. Now, obviously, the story is not exactly that's what happened, because Rabbeinu Tam, we said, is not active in the times of Rashi. But the point is, in the times of Rabbeinu Tam. Now, so last time I also brought in that Rabbeinu Tam was a shofar expert. People don't really know about this, and I found also again a lot of times when I prepared the shiurim, it's a lot about siyat d'shmai. We once actually had a short little clip of 3 seconds. Is Rabbi Bruck going to perform a Gairul Hagra? So the answer is that in this room, I have no idea what I will pull out randomly because of a completely different other topic. So I was looking into a different aspect with Safras. I pull out a whole thing, and Professor Chachmei has Arichos in one of his svarim dealing with the Rabbeinu Tam aspect of Rabbeinu Tam was an expert in Safra. So part of my claim is that Rabbeinu Tam, you say, similar to what this Rav Mashash is claiming, that in the times of Rabbeinu Tam, people, he was coming to be Masakin. Okay, fine, whatever. Now, bottom line is that in the nuances of all the different nukudas of this mahalach of what happened exactly, so Rav Kasher deals with it at length in a few different places in his writings, and I quoted then this Gewaldige Chibur from Rav Greenspan, which was published by Meister, but in recent years was all collected from Mechon Yerushalayim called Meleches Machshavos. Amir Hashem, I will be devoting a episode about this Yid Rav Nachman Greenspan in the near next week or two. But the point is that, and I said, is that sometimes someone could take something and say, oh, no one was wearing tefillin from the times of Chazal till the times of the late Rishonim, let's say. And we take a fine that I said that some maskilim, and some of these maskilim are very learned, but they have evil intentions. And one pretty bad maskil, his name was Yeshua Heschel Shor. So he actually wrote, using a lot of different sources, Yidden for X amount of years, no dice. They were not doing tefillin. I said, Chas v'shalom, that's not my goal over here at all. Just meant is that there was, and we're going to see soon that what was really going on. It's not that, they weren't wearing tefillin and they couldn't open up any pairs of tefillin. Okay, now what does that mean? Was there tefillin or was it not tefillin? The answer is yes, Yidden were wearing tefillin. But, and this is the mahalach that's much more famous when one talks about these type of questions, and this is as follows: when you learn Hilchus shofar, so we also find that it's remarkable is that there's all different versions of how you blow the shofar. So the question is, I don't understand, which is the way you should blow the shofar? Is there a right way or is there a wrong way? So there is a famous Rav Hai Gaon that's quoted by all the Rishonim. There's all arichos about it. But bottom line is that what happened was there was what's known as Takanas Rabavo. So so it seems like this, that for centuries there was different ways how people were blowing the shofar. All of a sudden he comes and says, this is how you're supposed to do it. So the question is, what's going on? Until the way they asked Rabbeinu Hai, I said, is how did they blow shofar from Moshe Rabbeinu and onwards, right? We know this is a mitzvah say from a Torah. What's going on that all of a sudden he said he was machriya, this is how you're supposed to blow. So Rabbeinu Hai says like this: Ve'eshavu zal ki bevadei truas Torah b'kol echa me'elu bein begnuche bein bilule shakvanas haTorah betrua la'asoisei mikayos shvarim ubetchila hayos zeh shvarim v'zeh yavava is kfi ma shenira loy shu yoser yafa. We know shofar has to do with the sound and what the sounds are. So the sounds are not clear. Different people have different all different types of things. You tell a guy this is music. Okay, that's called music. So the same thing, especially in sound. We know al tam v'reich and v'keach is a type of thing. So when it's yes, you're supposed to make a sound through a shofar, but just because one guy says it's a sound, is that the kavanah of what the Torah wanted? So there was different things that were called different sounds. But now what happened is like this: so each person was doing the sound, the yavavos, the kalos shvarim that he masheniroloi shu yoser yafa v'yakulon yotzin nechavasim. Everyone was doing the right thing. The chacham hayodei ken aval hamoinam hayatoin shayisayvim sheyesh chiluk beineim v'shelo yotze elu elu. They thought, oh, that shul, they're doing it. They don't know what they're talking about. To be because of the hadyotis, the gam shaloite tyrikish Tairas, and also a famous thing in the sugya of Bal Tosef, of Lois Sasser, which the chinuch is ma'irich a lot about. Bara bavu v'tikin lasis kol echa kediver elu ve'elu, to do both. The gam hoisef truachas mishaloi ki nosson daitel isaken atru bechol mini kol nishbash efshar anoigim reisha yadav and nirla yotis sheish machlekes beineim nakli talmud al derech machlekes ber kush v'teretz. So it comes out according to this Rav Hai Gaon, which is the explanation for why we have so many multiple different kailas, is that originally because it's not so simple what's the call that you're supposed to hear, but then came along Rav Hai and he made it more central that it's supposed to be in these formats and these nuschais. Okay, now so let me say the question that I'm asking with Rabbeinu Tam and wanting to know what's going on. That's the question that many ask with shofar, and already they asked it to Rav Hai Gaon, and that's what Rav Hai Gaon said. So it turns out like this. So Lamashal, going back to this Rav Mashash, so he talks about this, and he also brings you down this Rav Hai Gaon, and he says like this: until then, Kaidim Rashi Rabbeinu Tam was a machlokes between kihilos. Like many different things we find in machlokes. Rashi wanted to be machriya to make one takana in Klal Yisrael, so that the head yotis should not come which they Teiris and be mezalzel and achas tefillin, which is similar to what I'm telling is the Shibolei HaLeket says ultimately happened. Rabbeinu Tam says no, you the same nakuda. What Rashi was trying to do is to make one takana, says Rabbeinu Tam. That's what I want to do, but going back to the Gemara, this is the right way. Okay, fine. But the point is they each wanted to do one similar to this that he says this sugya of shofar. Fine. So now it comes out like this. It turns out that taka, if one looks, one will find that there are, before Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam arguing about this, there's a huge Messiah of different ways how tefillin were done. You say Rashi's way legitimately could be found beforehand, and Rabbeinu Tam's way could be found earlier in different ga'inim. So Memela, what was going on in the machlekes was they couldn't open up. It wasn't shot they could go open up a particular pair of tefillin and the story's finished. It's not going to be finished because you're going to find different pairs of tefillin. But what happened was that it became a thing that wasn't clear what's the right way. They wanted to make it because just like the Hadyatis, which is going on which is the story with the shofar. Now, what happens is like this. This is a mahalach. This mahalach is found. A lot of people say it. Rav Margolios is ma'irich about it. Also in his Chuvas Min Hashamayim, and the Arizal there, and some other places where he talks about it. So now, Lamashal, the Radziner in his Maimer Psilt Chelis, where he talks about Chelis. Now I have no idea how it gets into the sugi over there, but I imagine also he asks like this: Tefillin Shal Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi. They were wearing it all the time. That there are makairis. Now, what does he do? He says like this: there's L'mashal bezara kadosh. V'yesh elu v'elu divrei Elokim chayim v'shneim yesh lam makam. L'zois kol zman shaloi balak v'ay alach l'doris l'kol Yisrael. Be'emes ha'yirashus b'yad kol bezdin l'noy kafi chavas daitoi. Ukama ha'yinoigim mitzvon shal Rashi v'kama ha'yinoigim mitzvon shal Rabbeinu Tam v'lo yakveda b'zer. Rak achar kach b'mei Rashi Rabbeinu Tam bo l'kvay halacha kechem ha'adeh. So he's saying this type of nakuda that they come to be machriya like a certain way. But both are legitimate ways, which is a key factor in this ganze story, that they're both legitimate. We know, now, okay, so now the question goes like this. So they're both legitimate ways. So the shaila is, where is it coming from that they're both legitimate ways? So Al-Pi Pasha Pshat, and when one learns the sugya, and we have many, many Rishonim that learn up, we said it all goes back to the Gemara Lamed Daled Amud Beis, and already they have a Mechilta, we already threw out about the Yerushalmi story, and the point is, and then Taisus has all Arichas over here, that there's different Ga'inim, so what you come out seeing is that there are legitimate Makairis and how to learn up a Gemara, a Bavli, and then there's a Mechilta how to learn up, and then there's Ga'inim have a different way different ways how to learn the Gemara, and Rabbeinu Tam can be found elsewhere. Fine. But in all the conversation, there's no concepts of kabbalah. There's no, which is what, if you note, when I said over the Radziner throws in the Zara Kaddish, which I think I threw out last time, Rav Margolios and many others, just to throw out the Tiferes Tzvi from Rav Spielman and his incredible work Tiferes Tzvi on the Zoyar. So he has pages and pages where he goes through this sugya, halacha, and kabbalah over here, and showing you this different Zayars also, that it's mavur, that there was established two shitas with the Zayar. But what I'm trying to bring out is that they're not, the conversation is that they're not even talking about that. It could be it's true, 100%, that could be 100% true, but when the Nakuda is, there's a Bavli, and there's two legitimate ways how Ga'oinim / Rishonim through the Dairis that are collected in all the different Likutim, Svarim, and everything, learned up this Gemara, and therefore what was going on was Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam were just coming to Maharil like one way. Fine. Now, one of the Svarim that deals with this, and this is the go-to sefer that has Arichos and how he sets it up, this to say this answer, he talks about with shofar, and then more by Arichos is to deal with it b'negei tefillin, is the Sefer Amunas Chachamim. The Sefer Amunas Chachamim was written by a Chashav Adayin in Italy, Aviad Sar Sholom Basla. So he was his work that he wrote called Amunas Chachamim was to explain the galus of kabbalah. He was coming to answer up philosophy. He all different. He was very knowledgeable in other chachmas, and he seems to have vikuchim with many goyim also. And his work is a defense of kabbalah and of Torah Bechlal, and so much so that it's brought down. Rabbi Yaakov Emden was very into this work, although he says that I argue on him with various nakudas, but l'mais on many things we agree. And Rabbi Yaakov Emden wrote systematic a bunch of aros on the Chibur Amunas Chacham. Now the sefer was a very well-known sefer, and Memela, a lot of times when people who deal with this question of Rabbeinu Tam tefillin, Rashi and Tam tefillin, what happened, they right away send you to the Amunas Chacham. So L'mashal, last time we spoke out that there was a whole sefer, more than one sefer, was written on Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. There's a Tiferes L'Moshe, a Yid who died in the Holocaust. So he was a son-in-law by the Revolts, the Divrei Yisrael. So he asked this question to Marshag, one of the Gedolim in Hungary. Told him, look in the Amunas Chachamim. And Keseder, you see, people, when they handle this question, they send you to the Amunas Chachamim. He's the address in the end of the sefer. So he brings this out in a whole sophisticated way, because he's coming to deal with kabbalah in this conversation, and bring out that there were two legitimate ways, and that's really what's supposed to be, and it wasn't so well known throughout the generations. The kabbalistic ways, it was hidden from the masses, again similar to all this, and that's what's going on, and so that's the mahalach that the L'mashal Amunas Chacham goes through. It's very beautiful how he writes it. But Rabbi Yaakov Emden, he doesn't go so much into what happens is when you sort of get lost until he gets to his point and he goes too off on tangents and everything. But the bottom line is he's going with this mahalach, but part of the agenda is this sefer is written in the 1700s and he's trying to defend Kabbalah. So Kabbalah, to mix in Kabbalah into the equation of the story of Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi Tefillin. Now, the problem is that when you look, at least in what we have written from all the Rishonim, no one's mentioning anything to do with Kabbalah. It's a Gemara Menachos, how to learn the Gemara Menachos, and that's where the conversation starts and ends, from the Gaonim and the Rishonim. Okay, fine. But as I said, once the Zohar is Nizgala, and then you have people such as later on the Radziner or this Amun Chacham already way before the Radziner, that's how they use this whole Mahalach, which is based on this Rav Hai Gaon. Fine. Now, so it comes out that we have now a second Mahalach in what was going on with opening up Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. Fine. So when I was hold on. Okay, so now this leads us into what happens. First of all, like this. So up till now, we're handling this Rashi, what we're calling Rashi, but we're now establishing that there are other people besides Rashi. And then there's Rabbeinu Tam, we're establishing that there's other people. These are both legitimate days before Rashi and before Rabbeinu Tam. Fine, Gewaldig. So are there any other Shitas out there? So I said that the various people, I already called it last time, there's endless amount of materials quoted about this. Different Rishonim, different Gaonim. The Rambam holds like Rashi. Obviously nothing to do with Rashi. We don't even know if the Rambam even knew anything about Rashi. It's a question that until today the academia is always busy hoping to find something if the Rambam knew anything about Rashi. But Rav Rambam, his son, it's clear, it seems he didn't know of Rashi. But bottom line is like this: the Rambam independently comes to this maskana similar to what Rashi. So now the point is, how does the Rambam come to this Messiah? So the story goes like this. When you learn the Rambam, which the Rambam is in Paragimel Halacha Hey, he says what he says, and over there the Ravid has a different way, and this Ravid turns out is a third Mahalach and how to learn up this Gemara in Menachos, which we're not going to go into. Comes along the Migdal. The Migdal has a ganze arichos over here, and he says like this: Ani Omer Harava Machaber Azel Mefarsh Kashakibel Meraboisov. The Ritzgeus, the Rif, Rabbeinu Yosef Alevi ben Magash, Rashi Haim de Beshitase, Kach Kiblu vePirshu Perak HaKaimitz Rabbah. Then he says, Vim Emeski Rabbeinu Tamzal veRabbam Amdu Beshitas Rabbeinu Hai Gaon veRabbah Amachloikis. That there was a Machloikis and there was a Shitas Rabbeinu Hai Gaon, not like this. So there was even though the Rambam had his Svardisha Messiah of Gaonim and going back from the Rimagash Rif and earlier, there was a different one from Rabbeinu Hai. Now then he says as follows: Acheskimu Rabbi Seinu Balei Toises Lotzes Yidei Shneim. Rabbeinu Balei Toises said to do both Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. Ki makam yesh beroish laniach shtei tefillin v'chein bezrei ad shekibalnu biyachad shemin hashamayim achichu v'amru keplukta be'ara kach plukta be'rekia v'svar machayim shlenasu levay b'ksav u'mvata kvar sholcha kanmoinim shematzu bekever Yechezkel hanavi tefillin losing tachas mereshayim u'batkum u'matzim keseder k'may shekatzer a Rambam v'chein nogu beroiv hamalchios. Okay, then he has a whole arichos, and then he brings down that there was that the Chachmei Lunel asked the Rambam about this, and he brings down what he says. We'll get to the Chachmei Lunel in a second, and then he says like this: Va'atarei gamrei v'heven toyr fadvarim k'kartum v'aniyim k'pshutim v'tamel al'amkim v'sidrim ha'yidei soid amarim shakadosh baruch hu menich tefillin yaskol sheish l'kol deis shoyer shvanaf ve'elu divrei kim chayim l'maytzeim v'yaskol divrei al derech emes k'mashal mashal hanimshal v'kvar hirol ruch amroim matzim b'medrash nistar. Again, now that all of a sudden this triggers Kabbalistic things. So here we have the Migdalais, a Rishon, bringing in the Kabbalah. This is the earliest source of a Rishon bringing in the Kabbalah to this thing. And then he says, fine. And he says he has a whole list of Messiah of where he gets it from, and that's not for now. Okay. But bottom line is, all of a sudden when you see this Migdalais, so we see a bunch of things are happening. One is he goes ba'arichos of the Rambam where the Rambam came from. Then he throws in the Taisvis holds to do Shneim. What's he referring to? Taisvis, just to throw out there, there's a legitimate mahalach in the Balei Taisis from the Sefer Truma onwards, which was that what? v'yir shamayim lotzes yidei shneim hamrin makom yesh beroish laniach shnei tefillin v'chein b'yakis and perak hamaitzi tefillin. Now, when you learn the Sefer Truma, he's not talking about anything to do with Kabbalah. Pashat, that both, and there's room on the head to do both. Okay, now you're going to have to keep this in mind soon. The Migdal is at the end tells to the Kabbalistic aspect, but not that the Tais, he's not saying that Tais's whole has anything to do with the Kabbalah, but Medrash Nistar, that's really that both are true. Fine. Now, he throws in, when he says Min HaShamayim, that refers to the discussion we had last time about the true Min HaShamayim, and he throws in about the Kever Yechezkel, which we'll return to momentarily. Now, so I said, when I began the episode last time, I said there's so many different stories of Svarim that play out in this whole conversation. So one of them is the Tshuvas Rabbeinu Chachmei Lunel to the Rambam. There were many various questions. They learned the Rambam very biyun, and they had a bunch of different shilas. So they wrote to the Rambam. And the Rambam answered them what his Makayos are. So there's a beautiful tshuva on this topic from the Rambam about this, where the Rambam shows where he got his whole story from. The Kesef Mishnah brings it down over here on the Rambam, and we have the tshuvas of Rambam also. Now, so part of the story is that I said again, just to throw out there, is that Rav Kapach held that the tshuvas Chachmei Lunel is a forgery, early forgery. Rabbi Yitzchak Shila holds it's definitely not a forgery, and I don't know why Kapach really felt so strongly his rayas are not convincing, and I don't really know so many people that accept Rav Kapach, although they accept a lot of different things of his in the Rambam. But the story that the Chachmei Lunel, this is real, the Rambam held like this, and this is a real tshuva, and basically we could prove it because of what we have other tshuvas of the Rambam where he says similar type of things, at least in this topic. But okay, now I just said, just to throw out there, that this also gets involved in the story, the Chachmei Lunel, which is not from Svarad, asking the Rambam about this sugya, what's going on, because they had a different Messiah. Okay, fine. Now, fine. So now another thing was that, which we threw out very quickly last time, was they bring up about Kever Yechezkel. That what happened is they found tefillin suddenly in Kever Yechezkel. So they said, you know what, let's open it up. So now what's interesting is that this is not the first pair of tefillin that they decided to open up. It turns out that there was a tefillin of Rabbeinu Hai, that it seems from the Rambam and his Tshuva and other Eshkols, that they said, oh, we should open it up, and then they found it one of the ways, and that's also part of the story. So what happened was, Kever Yechezkel, near Kever Yechezkel, they found an old pair of tefillin. So, according to the Rishonim that deal with this, I think the Smag, the Mordechai, they found the tefillin was like Rashi. So we have a Gavaldik Aryeh, like Rashi, from that find. I mean, say there was an archaeological find, not only today in Eretz Yisrael, where archaeology is such a big thing, and it plays out in a big topic in the sugya of tefillin, and especially the Dead Sea Scrolls, or of Goren, and books written about it in articles in the academic world, which is not for us right now. But the bottom line is like this. Says the Maharil Lamashal, which I pointed out in the last episode, that's the Makar for the Ramah over here. That's why the Ramah just goes with the Beis Yosef throughout this sugya. He says that the Maharil was asked about wearing, that someone asked him, should I wear that someone asked him like this: what's going on? Should you wear two pairs of tefillin, or shouldn't you wear? Why? Because what happened was, if you look in the Rush says, the Torah brings down from the Rush, Yir Shamayim Yatzi Yidei Shneim Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, and that's how he was knowing. So what's going on? Should you or shouldn't you? He said that was the question that was asked to the Maharil many years later. He says like this. So when it was brought down, what the Maharil answer was, one is there's a smag that they found by Kever Yechezkel, and then also the shelos of the Chaloim of Rabbeinu Tam, which we already spoke at last time. It's not Rabbeinu Tam, it's the true Min HaShamayim of a different Rabbi Yaakov, not Rabbeinu Tam. But bottom line it's a legitimate Makar of Shelos Chaloim, that both are legitimate. And then says the Maharil, it's not considered Mexico Europe. Fine. Anyway, it's kedai to see the exact lashon inside of the Tshuvas Maharil over here. We're not going to go into the exact details of what he says, but the bottom line is that there was a legitimate mahalach without Kabbalah to do both. Okay, fine. Okay, so we spoke out the Rambam. We spoke out the Chachmei Lunel speaking about it with him. So what's going on with this Kever Yechezkel? So last time I mentioned very quickly is that the Drisha brings down from his Rebbe. It could either be the Rama, but most likely it's the Marshal. Shemati Mimari. They listen say to Rabbeinu Tam, don't bring me a riot to go against Rabbeinu Tam from the tefillin that they found and they opened it up. Then it's Rashi. Why? Because why else was it? Because why else was it there? He says lashon is like this. Kiven shekasim ba'isen say the lokain nikru bekever kedin svarim psulin shenikvrim v'nitman bekever shel tzadik. It's shameless because it was wrong. I mean, say really, it's supposed to be like Rabbeinu Tam. Okay, Lamaisa the Bach does not accept this. He has a different thing because you didn't have to put in a gniza, which is a whole different sugya in the story of Rabbeinu Tam tefillin of the writing, which is obviously well beyond the scope of our conversation. Fine. So far, we've seen again Rambam, the Chachmei Lunel, the Maharil, the Smag. Fine. The Shoel, interestingly enough, over here is there's a Shoel UMeishiv that they bring down. A lot of times they bring it down Bekitzer, but it can be found in his Chedushim on Agadis in Masechtas Megillah Barichos. And he says a fascinating thing that it's part of the conversation is he says there's a Rabbeinu Tam tefillin, there's Rashi tefillin. So he says like this: in Eretz Yisrael. Hold on, let me just make sure I have the right lashon. He says that this was a dream that he had on Purim in 1864 to be mefarish the machlokes of Rashi and Tam in the sugya of tefillin, and he says like this: the Iker mitzvah is when in Eretz Yisrael, based on the famous Rambam that all the mitzvahs are for Eretz Yisrael. So Rashi is what they wore in Eretz Yisrael and in Chutz La'aretz, whereas Rabbeinu Tam tefillin was only worn in Eretz Yisrael because that's the Iker mitzvah. So he says, according to this, what's pshat they found in Kever Yechezkel? Kever Yechezkel is where Chidekel, Chutz La'aretz. So therefore, that's why they found the tefillin of Rashi there, not Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. Okay, there's a chap. He says there's a chap that he was megaltim in his dream. Obviously, a lot needs to be discussed, and you have to read the tremendous lashonos in the Shoel UMeishiv about this. Fine. Now, so when I was in the course of the conversation mentioning about the tefillin, so we just have to mention a few different interesting things. One of the makayros that people bring up when they handle the shaila is they talk about a tshuvas Besamim Rosh. So the tshuvas Besamim Rosh, which is supposed to be a tshuvas of the Rosh that was discovered from manuscript. So in there, he has a whole tshuva. It seems someone wanted to wrote a pair of tefillin in lashon of Targum. Okay, in the course of this tshuva, he says like this. He says like this. He gets into the Rashi Rabbeinu Tam. He says like this. Be'inyan hanachas aparshis bebatim shafshay lefi daita nirke medina talmud hoyle lanich liYisrael min hagam shekol zanais and yalav apikayris leimer eich hamitzas mufkekes biyadam v'imish mesaris biyadam mesina vein safek the puzzle zed the say the parshis ain't dvar tayr veishman hagainim shepirshu. He has a whole shtickle tayr over here. Now what's going on over here is like this. Adarab, not like the I said a whole mahalach based on Rav Hai Gaon that the Amaratzim were doing it, so they should not. He's claiming just mamash that's just opposite. Now it turns out, which I said, why the whole sugya tefillin Rabbeinu Tam is for a Sfarim collector, lover, it's very gishmak, is because of Besamim Rosh, according to most, is a forgery. So you can't even, why should you talk about it? Just the problem is a lot of people were not aware of this, so they bring it into the conversation. So I'm just throwing it out there. He's claiming this thing in the name of the Rosh about Rabbeinu Tam, which will be is that you shouldn't even allow the Shita to get through. Okay, fine. Now, in the course of the sugya, there's an Eshkol. Now, in the story of the Eshkol is that at one point, one of the editions of the Eshkol was claimed to be a forgery, but then they found what is for sure Eshkol. And the question is, what was the first Eshkol? Now, what that plays out is that already Taisis and Menachos, which we already spoke about a few times, and in the other episode, he brings down that there's a piece in the Sefer Shimusha Rabbah, which is from the Gainim, And the Rishonim had this small work on Hilchos Tefillin. So the way Taisus says it is that the Shimusha Rabbah is like Rashi. But it turns out, according to the way the Eshkol has it, and we're not going to get into the whole story of the Eshkol forgery. We're learning about a lot of forgeries, the Besamim Rosh forgery, the Chachmei Lunel forgery, and now the Shimusha, the Ravid for the Eshkol forgery, how it plays out with the Shimusha Rabbah. But the bottom line is that the Shimusha Rabbah all of a sudden becomes another mahalach in the story of tefillin, which becomes a legitimate thing. What is that? What do I mean? So in the times of the Arizal, right after he was nifter, so there was a Yid, Rav Shlomo, who came to Tzvas in the 1600s, early 1600s, wrote back to he was from Poland, and he wrote back to the Yid in Poland what he saw, what he heard from what's going on in Tzfas. And the fascinating material in his letters. It's been published numerous different times. Aviad Sar Sholom has them in beautiful volumes that you could buy, and you get to read all about the Arizal, what was going on, mamish right after the Arizal, what was going on in Tzfas in this period of time. So in the course of this conversation, he says, what tefillin did the Arizal wear amongst the pairs of tefillin he wore? Tefillin Shimusha Rabbah. So the shaila is, what's going on? The Arizal is wearing Shimusha Rabbah, so what does that mean? So if you go and you open up your Taisus, that means he's learning like Rashi. But it turns out, if you have your Eshkol, and Rishonim had a Shimusha Rabbah, not at all like our Rashi, but a third Shita, or really a fourth Shita, because we already mentioned, which without explaining what the fourth Shita is, we said that the Ravid argues on the Rambam is a fourth Shita. So it comes out so far that there are four mainstream Shitas, what's known as the Rashi tefillin, Rabbeinu Tam tefillin, both are representing early Messiahs. There's the Raiva, and then there's Shimusha Rabbah, a Gainim material, which turns out that there's different nuskais in what the Shimusha Rabbah tefillin is. Okay. Now, what happens is like this: that so in the Mekubalim, they start wearing not only to wear the tefillin of Rashi, Rabbeinu Tam, which we now heard a few times, and we saw from the Migdal is the Medrash Nistar, that the Zayar also talks about this, so you have to wear Rashi Rabbeinu Tam. There's a third pair of tefillin called Shimusha Rabbah that they have to wear, because the Arizal is wearing it. Okay. So does everyone accept this? So here again, our goal is not to quote all the Maharil about this, not even to attempt to quote all the Maharil, just to throw out there a drop in the bucket. It's like this: there's a massive chuvas Rama MiPano on the sugya, Simon Kuf Zayin. Kedai to learn Be'iyun, how he learns up the whole sugya, and the Rama MiPano, he's actually also shtelz to our Rav Hai Gaon that we spoke about earlier on, about that there's machlokes with tefillin. He also deals with the Shimusha Rabbah. Now, in the course of this conversation, he kiyadua his relationship with the Arizal, with accepting the Arizal. When that happens is beyond the scope of today. What Rama MiPano in the world of Kabbalah, also a fascinating conversation, not for now, but in the course of this incredible tshuva. So first he throws out like this. He says, there's no problem of loises kaidu. Some people had held that to wear the two pairs of tefillin, Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, is a problem of loises kaidu. He says in passing, it's not loises kaidu, and that's why the Rosh Lamashal, they wore it, and there were many people, and he says the following sentence, Imam Kilos Gedoyle Shayimanichim Shal Rashi v'Shal Rabbeinu Tam Yachad Chad Zugel L'Shem Tefillin v'Chad L'Shem Retzuas Balma. They wore it together, but they had different kavanas for which pair for what. And okay, anyway, he talks about it, and in the course of this sugya, he talks by Richos also about the Shimusha Rabbah and other Rishonim that he had. It's incredible the Rishonim that he had, and then they disappear until they're discovered a few hundred years later again. Now, in the course of this conversation, when I was reading a line over here, and he says like this: the whole time we keep on asking, just open up the pair of tefillin. So he opened up the tefillin to see what was done before. So he says that in his time, Sefer Mumcha Neman Shana Seimchen Ola Betikan Tefillin B'chol Davar Shebe Kedusha Ki Zeh Kama Shana Pasach Tefillin Yesharis Ma'oil V'Doikam Umatza Ala Oifen Asher Zgan Shesidrim Ahu Shimusha Rabbah Upaslam HaSefer Be'esahi Ki Adayin Lo Nigla Olav Razeh. He didn't know about the Shimusha Rabbah of the Arizal, etc. We say he didn't have this. Not everyone knew about. Let's say what today you go into a guy that's holding the sugi, goes, yeah, the Shimusha Rabbah, the two Eshkols, the Gainim, the Rosh brings it down. He didn't have it. So this cipher was a mumka nifla. Open up the tefillin and he sees it's not Rashi, it's not Rabbeinu Tam, and he passes it. The Gamaniri you see Ahashon Rabbis Belosan Shatfilm Begnizos Loyachav Loishnaim Sheyisidrim Parshis and Kach. then the Rama MiPano, because you have to understand, Rama MiPano is living right after the Arizal, right after the whole thing, that he's getting all this information from Tzfas, coming all the way to Italy, which is playing a role in understanding his whole Kabbalah, his whole world of Kabbalah, how it switches. At one hand, he was a Makubal based on certain Mahalachim and Kabbalah. Then all of a sudden he gets manuscripts to the Arizal and he changes, so he finds out about that Arizal is doing Shimusha Rabbah, and there's a different Shimusha Rabbah, not the Shimusha Rabbah of that we're going, there's a look in the Taisus that says it's like Rashi. Obviously, there's a third one. He also didn't know about it. And the point is that he realized that there must be, if he's finding in the Gniza tefillin of this other shita of of tefillin of Shimusha Rabbah, he realized must be there's something going on, and he finds out taka that what's going on is, yes, the Arizal wore that type of tefillin. Okay, now, so we're seeing that the story is beyond fascinating, and just the rest of the episode, we're just going to throw out a few more ideas, controversies relating to all this, and some other pratim. So there was a chibur from someone also around this time, and this is a incredible chibur. His name was also an Italian mamish right after the time of Beis Yosef. I think his name was Shmuel Aryeh, who wrote a massive work on the Beis Yosef. And Meir Ben Yo publishes in a book called Yosef Bechiri. And just to throw out there, Rav Zalman read through this book and even gave him an aris on it. And in there he has a big arichos about Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. So he brings down the Iker mitzvah. He says it like Rashi Rabbeinu Tam. And then he says, yeah, you're going to tell me there's a Zoyar and there's a Mehemna, etc., etc. He says like this. V'i efshar loimer sha'alacha kechol ha'deis. Chalila v'chas loimer davazeh. Anichem beis zugis tefillin loy shaper of the manichem shneim yachad. If they wear both. Don't tell me that his gedolim that say like this. Fine, he goes through, he talks about it, and then he's mamish against this, because what was happening was at this time, this is when more people were in general, he says the Beis Yosef is against when people are mechadish minhagim. So he says this is a chiddush. If he does it b'tzina, he's okay with it. Now you have to understand, this is a chibur written the same time as the Beis Yosef is being written. So it's not shot, if a guy wrote this 300 years later and everyone knows about what says in the Shulchan Aruch and the Beis Yosef, it will be different. He's writing at that time. He says it's hamtzah, it's a problem about Taisif, he says, and there are other Makairis that also throw out there that there's a problem about Taisif. So he writes, the kids are very, very stark against wearing the tefillin, and he says, yes, I'm aware of what steht in Zoyar, etc. He's, I believe, a contemporary of the Rama MiPano. Okay. Now, then there's a fascinating Maramakam in the Sugya, the Yosef Ometz. Now, the Yosef Ometz, I've quoted him numerous times. The Yosef Ometz is what? He was on the Bezdin with the Shla. He knows the Shla ganz fine. He knows the Shla very well. And it's an incredible sefer from Hagam of Ashkenaz. And I've quoted fascinating passages throughout different episodes. And yes, it needs its own few episodes, but that's not for right now. But he says like this. Rashi of Rabbeinu Tam, he wasn't sure. Maybe it's a problem of Yura. You're showing your chash of a person, etc. Whatever Yura means, even fine. Then he says, Vim loy Manichem and Yetzim they suffolk mitzvahs hakdoila azay she shayrish and Husseinu tefillin we know is so important. Achamali libi lichtov. Already the Shla had made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, so he said, you know what? Let me ask the Shla what's the story. And he says like this. The Shla told him, he says like this, no one wears both. So I was calm. They didn't have to wear both. I'm not better than them. Then he says, but the Reishis Chachmei brings down that you have to wear both. Then he says he ended up writing to Eretz Yisrael and he found out some people that they did wear both. But the point was, what was fascinating over here, and obviously this is also to discuss all the different aspects going on in this fascinating shtickle from the Yosef Ometz, is the Shla who went to Eretz Yisrael, and we know from the Igeres of the Shla that he also got introduced to Kabbalah Arizal. He's writing back to his good friend, not a Shvach Yid. We're talking about a Dayan in Frankfurt, a Chashav of a city, a good friend of his. In Eretz Yisrael, they don't wear two pairs of tefillin. So you see there's a lot happening with this. There's different times, different things. So just because we know, let's say, the Arizal was wearing it, doesn't mean that everyone was wearing it. Also, a chelik in the shayla. Okay. Now, so we will conclude with two more stories like this. Number one is, up till now, so according to, you're supposed to wear, the people wear Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. So do you wear Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam tefillin together or not? So if you live in Eretz Yisrael, a lot of times, and you might see a Sephardi Yid, he's wearing both Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam tefillin at the same time. So it turns out, again, through some of the Lashonis that I quoted already from Taisus to Sefer Truma, who's not mixing in Kabbalah, as I said, there's makam b'raish for 2 pairs of tefillin. So obviously not a big pairs of tefillin. They have smaller pairs of tefillin. This is avada, a massive pulmus, like everything else. And so Lamashal, that Rav Yosef holds avada not to wear both together. Not only that, as I just threw out this from this sefer, from this manuscript that brings down, it's about Taisif problems. There's Rishonim that holds about Taisif problems. You have to learn the sugya of about Taisif B'chalal over here. So to wear both, that's already more problematic. Okay, Rav Yosef wrote that. Rabbi Yaakov Hillel Kedarka B'Kodesh has a massive. First, it was a booklet, then it became a tshuva, and he's coming to attack what Bashteit Api the G'dolei Mekubalim. He's supposed to wear both. And this is an attack on Rav Yosef. And the kuntris was eventually put into his chuvas. Okay. Comes along Rav Mazuz. He also has to get involved in the Shaila. He writes about it, and he holds like Rav Avadia. He's a tremendous chassid Rav Avadia from the second he came to Eretz Yisrael, maybe even earlier. He writes about this in his recently published autobiography. Fine. A fourth Sephardi Gadol gets involved in this conversation. Rabbi Yosef Mizrahi publishes in his work a work. What the original name I don't remember, but he has a work Chazon Yosef, which is a collection of various pulmusin of his, and they are a massive work, 80 pages, discussing, showing that you're supposed to wear 2, like Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, to wear both at the same time. Fine. Now, these machlokes are incredible. How they go through bringing down all the Kabbalistic sources, dealing with everything, handling the Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yaakov Hillel. Fine. At the end of his piece, he has literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages, 9 pages, of different Sephardi Gedolim and Mekubalim that he collected from his generation and the generation before that wore taka like Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, both together. A fascinating thing, like all these names. To me, they don't mean much. I'm not familiar with the Sephardi world, or especially the Sephardi current Sephardi, the recent past 50, 60 years of Sephardi Mekubalim also. But Ayin Sham in this Kavaldik Sefer, you could see where he also goes through the whole sugya. Handling this thing. But what's happening is it says Davar Pashat, Avadi is supposed to wear both, and not only are you supposed to wear both, you should wear them together. That's that approach. And so I promised in the first episode that there's a pulmus with Rashi Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. Turns out there are multiple pulmusin through history that relate to Rashi Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. Number one, I'm going to just mention them, the kids and Nimrats, each one a few sentences about it. Number one, what's less known today is that there was the Chassam Sofer, his Rebbe Muvak was a Yid, a Kaddish, known as Nosson Adler. Less known, we spoke about this very quickly in the episode that we devoted to that flaw a few years back, that basically Reb Nosson Adler was under attack for various Hanhagas Kabbalias that he did in his base medrash privately. Amongst one of the things was he wore Rashi Rabbeinu Tam tefillin together, and they came out against this. So, fine. So this was a pulmus that took place in Frankfurt. Against the whole story behind it, through different historians misunderstood it. They didn't realize that it was on the pulmus, that this was, the story had to do with Reb Nosson Adler, nothing to do with Chassidus. What happened is that some people asked, was in the controversies of Chassidus, does this ever play a role? Okay, good kasha. So interestingly enough, in a maskilisha attack on Chassidim that was published by Ada Rappaport Albert, that's her name. She published a bunch of years ago. So in there, there's one of the questions is Lama diktucha Chasidim shafilu ani bedas lo yiftach b'bei zugas tefillin. Everyone passing like Rashi. Anyway, she has over here a whole arichos about the sugya if it came up in the Chassidim versus Misnagdim machloikasin about wearing Rashi Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. So, if let's say we didn't have any sources, it could very well be, it would make sense. But the problem is that there's a Shulchan Aruch over here. We said the Shulchan Aruch, the Rambam, the Maharil, which is the Taisus. Forget about Kabbalah over here. That it's legitimate to wear both. You should wear both pairs of tefillin. Okay, so it would be strange if all of a sudden this thing, the Chassidim, the Litvaks came and attacked the Chassidim. But Lamaisa, we do find in some problematic, interesting works of against Chassidim where this comes up. Another time this came up as a controversy was an episode that he devoted to Efraim Zalman Margolios, and a controversy that took place in Bride about Birchas Kaihanim, where there was a fellow, a tremendous makubal in the city of Bride, who wanted to reinstitute wearing Rabbeinu Tam. Amongst other things, is he wanted to reinstitute Nesias Kapayim daily. And we explained then that this was based on materials that were discovered from Rav Dessler, published the manuscript that he bought, published in his Binish Neis Tavadar. And this is the background behind the tshuva of Rabbi Efraim Zalman Margolios, the famous tshuva of his, where he deals with why taka we do not duchen daily us Ashkenazi Jews, but Svardim do. So in the course of this pulmis, Rabbi Efraim Zalman says that this Reb Shmuel, whoever that was, you'll have to look in that episode, he also wanted to reinstitute wearing Rabbeinu Tam tefillin for the masses. And Rabbi Efraim Zalman, who was pro-wearing Rabbeinu Tam tefillin, but he held masses? No. They should not be wearing tefillin. So this could possibly be, by Chassidim and Litvaks, it wasn't a big machlokes at all, but in cases we are just amaratzim wearing Rabbeinu Tam tefillin, there Rabbi Efraim Zalman got very nervous in that story. Okay, fine. So this is yet another controversy of wearing Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. Okay, now Lamaisa, we're coming to the end, and it's impossible not to mention one of them. If you ask anyone about Rabbeinu Tam tefillin, Rashi tefillin, and you don't mention this, you could be over who knows what type of a virus, but. And that is as follows. What does the Gra hold in all this? The Gra, we know, is Ish Kabbalah. He holds the desire. He knows everything. He's into Arizal. What does he wear? Does he wear 5 pairs of tefillin? Answer is that we have different accounts quoted in the Keser Rosh, and there's all different nuschais of them. But bottom line is, Rabbeinu Tam tefillin says in one of the nuschais is, when I get up to Shemayim, I have multiple kashas of 3 days' work to ask Rabbeinu Tam. The conclusion of the Gra was just like Rashi, and not to be Makayim both even. That was in the Keser Rosh. So tefillin Rabbeinu Tam, should you wear? He says no. Now it seems interestingly enough, as Reb Chaim Volozhiner might have, before he asked this kasha, was wearing Rabbeinu Tam tefillin, and he stopped. Okay, this is interesting Nakuda in the story that's not so much pointed out, but bottom line is, in one of the answers of this conversation, there's always multiple answers. Sometimes the question could have been asked a bunch of times. He says, if I would have to do like Rabbeinu Tam, I would have to do 64 pairs of tefillin to Mekayim all the shitas, Rabbeinu Tam. And then in this course of this nusach, which can be found in the newer editions of the Keser Rosh, it mentions taka what those cheshbonos are. Okay. So Lamaisa, the Gra clearly did not. But the shaila is, do we find in Litvisher sources people wearing tefillin? So Rabbeinu Tam. So Mashal Rav Shlomo Zalman, he inherited this from his father, Rav Chaim Auerbach, the great Makubal, who Mir Tzashem, we will be devoting at least one episode in the episodes behind the paywall within the Rav Shlomo Zalman series. So his father was Rosh Yeshiva Shar Shamayim. He wore Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. So Rav Shlomo Zalman, he inherited, he wore them. But did he hold that everyone else should? That's a different conversation. We spoke about also in those episodes. I already spoke a little bit about the influence of Reb Dovid Baran on Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Those episodes are also again found behind the paywall. Sorry, Reb Dovid Baran, he started wearing tefillin after the age of 60. Fine. Reb Chaim Berlin, we find in his Tzava that he talks about his Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. So it sounds like he was wearing Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. In a recent controversy that's been lebedik going on between Reb David Kamenetsky, who was nifter, and Yeshua Munshine was nifter 11 years ago, but the children felt just recently that they must produce and publish the vicious attack that Yeshua Munshine wrote against Reb David Kamenetsky, and they just released it in PDF form a few months ago. In there, they talk about the Yidber Shlomo Dubnov. So what happened is that Rav David Kamenetsky said, we see he's a tremendous Yer Shemayim because we find in his materials left behind is he had a pair of Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. So he says, what? Just because he has a pair of Rabbeinu Tam tefillin means he wore it? He had it. He got it from somewhere. Anyway, so obviously every time you find in a Tavah, you can't necessarily bring a raya that the guy wore it. Maybe he just had it. It's time from his aid, just time to have in his collection. Fine. But anyway, are there Litvisher people that wore Rabbeinu Tam tefillin? So the Keren Ayra, interestingly enough, wore it. A tremendous Litvisher person. We've spoken about him a bunch of times quickly in the various episodes on Shas. And last but definitely not least, Aderes originally wore Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. Why? Because he saw that this Agzai is given noig Sam Sefer. Gevaldik. Now, Sam Sefer wore Rabbeinu Tam tefillin, but did he wear like Reb Nosson Adler, his Rebbe, who wore both at once? It does not sound like it. He wore it only afterwards. But says the Aderes, but I loved the Sam Sefer. But then I got a hold of the Gra, and I found that the Gra was against it. I didn't know what to do. Okay, so he talks about what to do, etc., etc. Just the Messiah, the great Roshai, the Blitsky, the Makubal, the Litvak, who also absorbed from the worlds of Svardim and the Litvischer world and the Makubal, everything. So he wore 4 pairs of tefillin, Shimusha, Rabbah, Rabbeinu Tam, Rashi. He wore tefillin the whole day. It was one of his big campaigns, tefillin the whole day. So bottom line is, these are just some of the yediyos about Rabbeinu Tam tefillin that are out there. Obviously, we're not scratching the surface. The sugyos are beautiful. One should make it his business to learn it. And as Rabbi Shmuel began at the beginning, you ready now? See? No reason not to. And not only that, the case could be made. There's a Shulchan Aruch over here. We're not. If someone came and we have a conversation, you say, okay, he says, oh yeah, it's Arizal. So you could be a pessimistic fucking say, okay, I don't do most things from Arizal. I'm not on such a high madrega. But once it's already in Shulchan Aruch and we see Rishayim and we see it's legitimate, it changes a different thing. So just because you're wearing it, it might not be so bad to wear Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. So therefore, the Seifrim will put the numbers underneath of Seifrim that are selling Rabbeinu Tam tefillin out there, etc., etc. Okay, that's all for today.
Okay, it took 57 minutes till you got the Goin and the Litvish Mahalach into this whole episode. I hope all the Litvaks are still listening till the end. They're going to accuse you of going off somewhere. But either way, great content. Very, very fascinating and interesting, and looking forward to more. Thank you.